Good afternoon and welcome to ABERG's third annual Black Voices Matter lecture series in recognition of Black History Month. This year's theme is Belonging, Finding a Place of Our Own, where we will have leaders of employee resource groups and HBCUs focusing on the impact and significance of finding a safe space for colleagues and students to grow and thrive. While Black History Month is nationally recognized, ABERG recognizes that Black history occurs every day of the year. Today, we have a fantastic guest, and we cannot wait to introduce him to you. Please note that we will have a special session from 1 to 1:30 to conduct a private Q&A with our speaker. However, don't forget to post your questions to the chat, and our committee will keep their eyes out for it. Also, don't forget to complete the evaluation at the end. We will make sure we share the link in the chat. I am Danielle Hairston Green, the Institute Director for Human Development and Relationships and the chairperson for the African American Black Employee Resource Group with UW-Madison Division of Extension. I want to take some time to reflect on this week in Black history by introducing you to my new friend, Bella. One second.
History moment. Alexander Mouse elevator design made riding elevators safer. Prior to, elevators were operated manually. People had to open and close the doors above the elevator and shout every time. Mouse design allowed the doors operate automatically. This has been my Black History moment. Come back tomorrow for another Black History moment. Welcome.
So I hope you enjoy that quick Black History moment. We're hoping to get Bella here in person to meet you guys. Let's see, we're going to go back. Can you see my screen? Everything's cool? All right, awesome. Please visit our ABERG SharePoint site and visit our calendar events to find out more information about Black history. Thank you again for sharing your lunch hour with the African American Black Employee Resource Group. The ABERG's purpose is to serve as a resource for and foster current and future African American colleagues' success by sponsoring programming, providing collegial support, encouraging belonging, and raising a collective voice related to issues that impact employees' ability to thrive personally and professionally. We would love your feedback again, and we'll provide a link to a survey in our chat box as we close this session today. I want to also acknowledge our committee members. Rick Mills is the secretary of our organization or our resource group. Eva Terry is the treasurer. James Bowling and Catherine Borg-Smock are co-chair for membership and retention committee. Carla Williams and Atifa Robinson are co-chairs for marketing and the media committee. And we have our interim professional development shared leadership between Erin Conway, Jenny Abel, Rhonda Davis, Cheryl Isabel Quintella Perry, and Heather Quackenboss. I am super excited to introduce to you one of my many amazing friends and colleagues, Dr. Parris Carter. Dr. Parris Carter will be presenting today on empowering young Black voices to matter. Dr. Carter serves as the Vice President for Student Engagement and Success at Wilberforce University. As a Chief Student Affairs Officer, he leads the strategic direction of a multifaceted division responsible for the co-curricular experience at the institution. He returns to Wilberforce University after serving as the Associate Vice President for Student Affairs at Howard University since 2016. He served as the Executive Director of Student Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh at Titusville, where he oversaw the Student Affairs Division with a focus on retention and student engagement. His role as Dean of Students at the oldest private HBCU entailed a broad range of student leadership and development work. He was a chief judicial affairs officer and managed the crisis prevention and response team. In addition, he oversaw the areas of counseling services, residence life, Greek affairs, student activities and leadership, intramural recreation programs, and student transportation services. In addition to the DOS role, he was also the project director for the National Minority Male Health Project, where he directed the efforts of his federally funded project at the institution that was designed to deliver a comprehensive campus and community-based program to address issues of health for male minorities. Parris loves his family, values his friends, which is me, and enjoys spending time with his wife, Nina Dardanaya, and sons, Parris Jr. and Princeton Elijah. To review his full bio, please visit the ABERT SharePoint site. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you, Dr. Parris Carter.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison Green. I appreciate that intro. Anytime that I hear my intro, I'm always surprised a little bit, but I'm honored as well when people kind of give that presentation of you. My sound is okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So this is my second week hearing from Bella, and I already love her too. So good afternoon and happy Black History Month. You all know, I'm sure, as educators, but just a brief history. 1926, Carter G. Woodson, who's also known as the father of Black history, started Negro History Week. Then in 1976, a full month was dedicated to celebrating Black pioneers, accomplishments, and traditions. And I'm just really happy to be with you, sharing my experiences and my perspectives on empowering young Black voices. So this is Amanda Gorman, American poet and activist who read her poem, "The Hill Will Climb," at the 2021 inauguration. She made history, and I'll get into that a little later.
Dr. Parris, I'm going to ask you, are you sharing your screen? Because I don't see it. Does anyone else see his screen? Okay. Try it again.
All right, here we go. Let me see. How's that?
Looks great.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right, so sorry. So again, this is Amanda Gorman, American poet and activist. She read her poem, "The Hill Will Climb," at the 2021 inauguration. Made history. We'll talk about that a little later. She doesn't know, because I have never met her, but her poem has had a lot of impact on the country, but it's also the theme of this conversation today. She, in my opinion, is the bright, she is the promise, I would say, of a bright future for us all. Young voices matter. Young Black voices matter. So today, my Black voice will do a few things, and I'll go over those so we know how we're going to spend the next 50 minutes or so. I'm going to thank a few people. I'm going to talk about myself. People are always pushing me to tell my stories, and I have some rich ones, so I will share some of that. I will share why I'm honored to spend time with you. And that is a complex notion of the work that I've done at HBCUs, the work that I'm doing currently at Wilberforce University, but also the work I've done in the diversity and equity and inclusion space. I will present HBCUs as institutions of access, hope, development, and equity. I acknowledge those who came before me. I think that is always critical. And I will go into why that is important. I'll share why equity work has no downtime. And then I'll charge us with the notion that inclusion has to be for everyone. And probably this would be a preaching to the church, because I would imagine that those engaged in the series of conversations already understand that. All right. Okay. So my thank yous first to the African American Black Employee Resource Group at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you for hosting me. Special thanks to Dr. Danielle Harrison Green, a colleague and a friend I met while working at Howard University. She was instrumental in us launching the first ever Parent Advisory Council at Howard. So I've been doing exactly what she tells me to do now for many, many years. But she served as an executive leader for 2 years on the Parent Advisory Council while her daughter attended Howard. And so we actually made history. And it's really relevant, not just her invite, but for this to be the month that we do celebrate Black history, acknowledging the history that we're making today. And so Danielle, you help make history. So please know that. For those on the call, thank you for tuning in and doing the necessary work to make sure that our voices are at every table. As speakers, we can't always promise innovative, cutting edge content, but my hope is that you leave in an hour just feeling that your time was valuable in some aspect of your life and your work. I'd like to thank my late grandfather, James E. Jacobs, who passed last year at the age of 99. He was an amazing man, patriarch of our family, educated, served his country, and was a lifelong learner. So many blessings that he gave us, and me specifically. So I try to acknowledge his legacy whenever I have the opportunity. He published 2 books at the age of 91, I believe. His mind and his reflection on life was stellar, and I strive to be his honorable legacy. Lastly, my parents, 2 loving HBCU graduates who set a standard in our household that doing just enough was never enough. Always strive to do things well, be a model, set the bar. They instill values and set a strong foundation for my adventurous life. And I'm making them proud, and making them proud has always been a goal of mine. So thank you for always pushing me to be the best version of myself. I love you, and I'll share more about my grandfather and parents later in the conversation. So these shout outs are important and relevant, as you know, as educators, that when people have an understanding of where they come from, there's a stronger likelihood that their goals will be obtained. And I am very, very aware of where I come from. Okay, so beyond the bio, because you can read that and heard Dr. Harrison Green share that. When I'm not working as the vice president for student engagement and success at the oldest private HBCU in the country, I teach part-time in my alma mater, which is Wright State University, and their student affairs and higher education master's program. I'm currently teaching a diversity issues and higher education course, and also the capstone course in that program. In addition, I am a senior consultant with JP Enterprises, which is a firm that provides strategy, leadership, and solutions for clients navigating through their diversity journey. The motto at JPE is the right kind of uncomfortable. At JPE, we've created a curriculum for our no-nonsense experience where we lead company executives, boards, and employees through difficult conversations under the diversity umbrella. We adopted the DIBS Big Nine that includes religion, race, age, politics, geography, sexuality, differing abilities, socioeconomics, and gender. Those are what we call the Big Nine. So we focus on work within these organizations to push them to an inclusive working environment. Many companies are struggling with their practices and policies and just creating that inclusive environment where all employees of all backgrounds, of all interests, feel that this place is for them. And so I help them dig into their biases that are intruding on that inclusivity. One of the other reasons that I was excited about this talk is helping others identify their own biases is life-changing work. And so when you can create a safe space for people to make mistakes, to say the wrong things in terms of their own knowledge base, but use those opportunities for education, when you can ask the tough questions, encourage people to be vulnerable, it's rewarding and reflective. And so many times I'm in the room and I'm facilitating these conversations that are very, very difficult. They're emotional, but they're also, they have a business context. Like, what is the bottom line of this? Why do I need to be inclusive? Why is diversity important for my business? And I'm in these rooms and I'm supposed to be the expert. And sure, there are data points that are important, but I'm also learning, myself, because the world around us is, in my mind, just a field of education, and it's my wish to make sure that I reflect on that and share that with all those that I'm working with. So all the work leans into my passion for serving HBCU institutions. I've had wonderful experience at other kinds of campuses, but my work at HBCUs has been special. Just yesterday, and it is just yesterday. So I met with the Student Government Association. As their vice president for student engagement, I use these meetings to also advise and coach around professional etiquette. So I'm not just listening to what they're bringing from a student experience standpoint, but I'm also, mentoring, and, anytime I can spend with young people, I want to maximize our time. So one of the executive leaders came in as a freshman, not a strong student academically, a little rough around the edges, no real interest in personal development, contemplated, dropping out on a couple of occasions. And now she's a senior, and I am working with her on her next step. But just the beauty of what I've been able to observe during those 3.5 years, her phases of growth, and then I can reflect on student development theory. And even though it's different for different populations of students, It's just amazing to see. She's graduating with 3.3. She's been an executive in student government. She's been a president of an organization. She's met with corporate leaders when they come on campus. She's been an ambassador for the university. And that is hard to explain. And some of that can happen at any institution, absolutely. But I think that there's a special kind of development that happens at HBCUs for some of our students. Yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to form a union with purpose to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. That's a section of Amanda Gorman's poem. There's a young man who I believe is amazing. He's a Wilberforce University student. He doesn't realize that yet. And with some encouragement from his mother, he sent me an email, and I'll quote from the email. Dr. Carter, I need some help networking, designing a resume, and making professional connections. Where I'm from, we don't get these kind of opportunities. Nobody talked about it. I've never been in those kind of spaces, so it's uncomfortable for me. Can you help me? And so I've met with this young man each week this semester. He was late to our first meeting, so I got him together on that, and he's been 5 minutes ahead each meeting afterwards. But that kind of engagement will help me get through any difficult week. Because it's students like that are starting at such a deficit. And we pride ourselves on bridging those gaps. We pride ourselves by, getting some of these students caught up where they can compete. There's a different kind of capital that I think is leveraged at HBCUs. Like there's a unique kind of environment at a community college. And those take unique strategies to help those students meet their success goals. I find value in my knowledge of various types of institutions. As mentioned before, I've been at a few different ones, but also the work and industry and workforce environment around DE&I, spending time with employee resource groups, corporate folks, higher ed colleagues, my family, my friends, allows me to pour into HBCU students to develop and prepare them for a difficult world that's around them. It's the work that I find to have true meaning. There are barriers of access and opportunity, and I get to provide information and solutions to even that playing field. I think about a time that I was at a small rural Pennsylvania campus, and there was a consistent issue between our Black students and the campus police. And I was a chief student affairs officer. I was the only person of color on staff. There were no faculty persons of color. And so, I was looking at the history of arrest, citations with our campus police force and our Black students, and there was an obvious problem there. And so, as the judicial officer, I had the opportunity to even that playing field, because I just saw that there was some severe discrimination taking place. When I would meet with some of the officers and the chief, there was a clear bias around our students of color. And so those opportunities to kind of disrupt, and I like to say even the playing field, it just drives the work, and sure, we have strategic planning, we have board reporting, we have campus improvement, we have graduation rates, and all that stuff is critically important. But the life of my work is really about helping those that have been disenfranchised have a chance to compete. And so HBCUs are great institutions to be able to do that. As a solutionist, I want to find practical remedies to inequities and societal problems. Most, are systemic and they're complex, and they take long-term strategy, but there has to be a care. There has to be an ethic of care. And I see that more at our HBCU institutions than I have seen at other institutions. That's just my experience, but I've just seen more of that ethic of care. An example is some of our HBCUs struggle around retention and graduation. Those rates comparatively are lower than some of our counterparts. Issues of finances, lack of academic preparation, first generation student kinds of things, are not having appropriate student support for the kind of student that may be there. And so we can't allow those barriers to not move us forward with the success of those students. And so if I can creatively identify initiatives that can assist with retention and ultimately graduation rates, I'm potentially changing the trajectory of many, many, many young people. I mean, that is a challenge that, I wake up to every day. And that's a challenge that is energizing. It has more meaning than just your job. And not to mention, and Wilberforce University is private, and so we don't get to take advantage of much state funding. But with state funding, really transitioning to performance-based data as opposed to enrollment data is just critical that we have strong leaders at our institutions. I fundamentally believe that God wants us to help improve the existence for other people. Helping, assisting, supporting, and giving our talents is what God wants. Some of my talents include helping others see their path more clearly and helping us recognize that if we embrace all differences, no one gets excluded. No ideology, there's no class, no race, all the other big nine that I reference. If there's no exclusion, policymakers, resources, government affairs, real estate, you name it, start to flatten. Amanda Gorman also said that we'll forever be tied together victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Okay, history made every day. So Amanda Gorman, poet that read at the inauguration, made history. My father made Black history. This is important for us to recognize, because we don't always have to read about what happened, 60 years ago, 50 years ago. My father was the first Black executive to fully retire from the Kroger Company. That's a big deal. It's a big deal. The swim and dive team at Howard, it's the only HBCU swim and dive team. I mentioned earlier, Dr. Harrison Green made history. In 50 years, someone will look at the archives at Howard and say, hey, this is when the parent program started. Super Bowl history was made a couple weeks ago with the 2 Black quarterbacks. The film industry is always, as of late, making a lot of history with First. Wes Moore, the first Black governor of Maryland. Hakeem Jeffries, the first Black lawmaker and leading in Congress. He's also a frat brother. Shout out to Hakeem Jeffries. But Black voices matter, and there's a gift in just being heard. We all have gifts to offer the world, and when used for good, it's amazing. So after doing some consulting work, as I mentioned, one of the things I do when I can, was working with a rapidly growing startup tech company. They had gone from I think 20 employees to about 100 employees within several months, and so we were meeting with the CEO who had reached out around some issues of diversity. After we spent a month with them, 4 sessions with them. And then he sent me an email. Dr. Carter, I understand this journey will have ups and downs, and it's scary at times for me. Fairly privileged white male CEO who hasn't had to think about diversity much. I'm learning that I do have biases that I have unconsciously led to certain decisions and business practices. I'm just realizing this now, and I'm just wondering how many people have I treated unfairly because of these biases. I'm nervous about unpacking this, but I'm committed to the work. Thank you. That's it. I mean, that is it. So this is my 24th year working in student affairs. I worked with thousands of students throughout my career. I've counseled students in my office during their feuds to 5 years later, being invited to their wedding. I've proofed more resumes, cover letters, scholarship applications, and I can remember I've written hundreds of recommendation letters, done mock interviews with students, have traveled to different states with students. I've put students on a plane for their first time. I've visited their families' homes. I've connected them with careers. I've hired some. And I have built these relationships sincerely. None of this I have taken lightly, because I believe that young people invite us into their lives with the hope that we're going to be good to them, responsible with our influence, and always keep their best interest in mind. And through these relationships, these students have also poured into me. It's an honor and a privilege to be instrumental in shaping the futures of so many young people. And I feel good about what I'm leaving behind at each institution. That's my goal. I may not have been able to change the direction of that institution, but I just want my legacy to be that I did good work to open up understanding for more people than before I was there, and that students felt that they had the kind of support that they deserve. Okay, how are we doing on time? All right, HBCUs are imperative. History matters. So there's a unique cadence. You know, people always ask me, like, so what is it? What is it? Like, you know, what should we know about an HBCU? Yeah, we can read, you know, we can look at data, you know, we can look at a program offering, but what is it? I think there's a unique cadence that prioritizes our history of African people, that's critical to our progress. As I mentioned earlier, you know, there's higher probability of meeting one's success and one's goals when we understand our historical context. Like, that has been proven, that when we understand it, we're more likely to be able to reach those things that we want for ourselves. That matters for young people. I mean, that is important. And sure, there are some young people that are like, history, that's not relative to my everyday, or that's not important in my life. And we, you know, we'll even have our own students talking about, I'm tired of hearing about this, I'm tired of hearing about that. But it is a measure that just strengthens the well-being of people when they understand what has come before them. And I think that that's one thing, one out of many that HBCUs do well. There's an embedded historical context on most of our campuses. For example, so Wilberforce University is actually the first HBCU owned and operated by people of African descent, okay? So in 1856, when the university was founded, we were established as a university in 1856. And so our designation as a university has not changed since 1856. Now, there are points of debate with a couple of other HBCUs, but again, you know, Wilberforce University has been Wilberforce University, owned and operated by people of African descent since 1856. There may have been some other teachers' colleges. There may have been some colleges established by the state, you know. So when you hear people debating, there really isn't a debate. But anyway, so imagine that in terms of history. You know, imagine 1856, where many Africans in America are still enslaved. I mean, imagine the strength of that. You have some free slaves that decided, we're going to start a university. I mean, with the conditions of our country, that is bold, And that is history that should never be lost. HBCUs still produce more Black doctors, lawyers, dentists, pharmacists, and STEM PhDs. In 2020, there was an article published. The title of the article is Out Punching Our Weight Class. And it was comparing the impressive numbers of HBCUs in these areas compared to Ivy Leagues. And doing this with a very different resource layout. So I like to classify that as the grit factor. I think HBCUs have a grit factor where we are going to support, we're going to get students through, we're going to help students understand their excellence, understand the importance of what they're doing. And I think that's part of our sort of mode of operation. And even though HBCUs, like any other institution of higher education, have systems in place, I think we help develop the intellect and capacity to disrupt the systems that have guided us, and specifically those systems that have lacked equity, have lacked access for all, and we are kind of breeding grounds for those disruptors. I have it may be a theory, but as in the field of education, I think HBCUs are positioned to save K-12 education. All right, here's what I mean. Here's my theory. So, dating back 30 years, there's been this need for more Black male educators in K-12. You need more Black men in the classroom. I was recruited, as an undergrad. You should go into education. And I wasn't interested, but there's been this lack of understanding, care. I mentioned care, and obviously equitable resources within some school districts. HBCU graduates, I think, have fortitude to reform curriculum and sort of level set some of the structures that have been in place, and unfortunately have hindered some of the academic progress of many young people of color. Our graduates have a passion for history and innovation ways to instruct, and sometimes by default, know how to maximize in situations where you haven't been given a lot of resource to do that. And I think if we could leverage HBCU products more in the educational system, we would start to see some turnaround. It's just my theory. It's just my theory. Kamala Harris, Raphael Warnock, Stacey Abrams, these are amazing examples of what many of us in the HBCU community have known, and that we produce students who are equipped to solve global issues, reach a diverse population of people, and are agents of change. And so I think, they sort of made the world stage several years ago, and it's given the opportunity to help others see what kind of well-rounded people HBCUs produce. And I do believe for many, that was a confirmation of what I have termed as magic, some magic that happens. Amanda Gorman, again, another piece from her poem, but within it, we found the power to author another chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. Okay. Institutions of hope. Empowerment, and if you think about the two students that I mentioned earlier, empowerment is one cornerstone of our work at HBCUs. Diversity and equity are emotional topics because people have to reconcile where they are on the spectrum, and that is not easy. And so once they reconcile where they are on the spectrum, they have to open themselves up to the notion that they probably aren't as far along as they think. And it takes some empowerment to move people through the process. So I draw some parallels with our students on campus. Like, many students doubt their abilities or have come from school districts that are underperforming. Many were told by the guidance counselors or advisors that they weren't college material. We help them see what their potential is. We kind of bring that out through the empowerment, just helping them believe in their abilities. And HBCUs are very diverse as well. No two campuses are the same. The campus environment at Howard University is very different from the environment at Wilberforce University, just different at Morehouse and North Carolina A&T or Dillard. But I do think that there's a consistent priority around helping students identify what their success metrics are and taking time to help them construct the plan to reach those. I think that that is consistent for all of our institutions. At Wilberforce University, our success model consists of the following. So, first semester retention. So through a robust summer orientation and fall welcome week, we work to provide students with the resources that they'll need to be successful and instilling campus pride. And this comes through the History of Wilberforce course. And we have a first-year readiness series that all students, all first-year students, take both of these. So that's important for us. Then, around academic achievement, we work closely with academic affairs to support students' well-being and including any course content support that is needed. This is one of the beauties of being at a very small institution. I get invited to the dean's meetings. I get invited to the academic affairs leadership meetings. And I talk about ways that we need to partner to make sure students are successful, to make sure that they're supported. And I know every campus talks about student support, every campus. I just maintain that it just looks a little different at HBCUs. So once we, move them to a strong academic foundation, we'll start to see students connect to campus, which is critical for their persistence. They will find mentorship opportunities and organizations and recreation, and this results in the holistic development. If we can't get students to that phase where they're starting to feel their holistic development, that's when we lose them. That's when we lose them. I don't know if that's as critical at other institutions, but I know for our students, it is. If we can get them through that, where they're understanding how they're developing, we will reach the graduation, and then their post-graduation goal attainment. And so first semester retention, campus pride, academic achievement, connectivity, graduation, goal attainment. That is our success model. And then part of my passion, excitement in investing is looking at, so I can look at best practices in the field. I can read this literature. I can pull from my experiences at other institutions that are doing some things really, really well. And, kind of mold that, pivot some things, but create something that fits on our campus. Our students have some of the same challenges that students at any institution of higher education has, but there's also some very unique challenges that our students have as well. And I pride myself on saying that I have blazed a few trails in that endeavor, because helping others see exactly what students need is not always easy. So I've been at HBCU 3 times. I've been at Wilberforce twice. I was at Howard, and then I was at a large system, 2 rural campuses, where I was the only Black employee. So I've had these 2 kind of extreme professional experiences. I've been in those uncomfortable meetings where you're proposing the first diversity committee and meeting resistance. I've worked to empower the student voice where faculty members would make offensive and inappropriate comments in class, and resulted in coordinating mandatory sensitivity training around language. And I've taken the Black Student Union from the campus to the local elementary school for Black History Month, where those kids in that school had never interacted with a Black person face to face in their lives. And what the impact of just that conversation and interaction. I've pushed for town hall meetings with local officials and our campus leaders because our Black students were experiencing issues of discrimination in town. And so this is all, part of my legacy, because I believe that, institutions of higher education, if we aren't becoming more well-rounded thinkers and more compassionate and more understanding of differences within the higher education community, it's going to be difficult to do it any other place. And so campus climate and supporting young people is a priority for me. Okay, let me speed it up. All right, trailblazers I know. So my boss, the 22nd president of Wilberforce University, tells the full story of Wilberforce. And I share maybe a third of it. It's a very, very interesting story, but he intentionally tells the story to our students and the larger community any opportunity he gets. He takes the privilege to talk about our rich history. We're small, we're in this rural area in Ohio, but the grounds are sacred. People like W.E.B. Du Bois and Dorothy Vaughan, walked our campus. Bayard Rustin, he was a student at our campus. Ironically, he was removed for protesting as a student, but went on to be a historical figure around social justice, and was really the right hand of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They were on our campus. My grandfather, I mentioned, he authored 2 books. At the age of 91, he wrote about our family history and his life growing up in Clintonville, Kentucky. I do just want to share his dedication page. So I dedicate this book to my parents, Henry and Carrie Jacobs, who taught me many things about life that carried me through this journey safely. My wife, Mildred, stood by my side. 52 years of marriage and mothered our 3 children, James Jr., Paula, and Carol. Paula is my mom. My 8 grandchildren, Jamie, Ben Jr., Kimberly, Parris, Natasha, James the third, Tara, Tamika, and my 11 great grandchildren, Jesse, Jordan, Amaya, Naya, Braden, Brooke, Gavlin, Graylin, James the fourth, and Princeton. 3 of those are mine. Truly, I've been blessed to spend many cherished moments with these little angels. And I think it is absolutely amazing that all of these great grands got to spend time with him. At his funeral, I brought them, they asked me to speak. I brought all of the grands up to line up around his casket. And I just spent, I don't know, 3 minutes talking about the importance of family history and the importance of legacy and carrying that on to make this, just a better world. And so I always need to acknowledge how great he was. And my parents, my father, education degree from Kentucky State University. He and my mom both graduated from Kentucky State University. He never taught a day in his life. He started working for Kroger, I think the week after graduation, spent, I don't know, almost 50 years at the Kroger company. He started as an assistant store manager, worked his way through the corporate environment in the 60s. In the 60s, there were no Black men in the corporate environment. And so my dad talks about stories of his employees using the N-word because they're forgetting that their boss is Black. And him being in VP meetings and some executives slipping and using the N-word and just apologizing profusely. Like he tells those stories about that environment. And so he did really well. And like I mentioned earlier, retired as a regional vice president of operations. But he was the first Black to fully retire with the Kroger company. And that is, and to me, very important. And then my mom, who was a teacher by trade, was invested in that trailblazing that my dad did, putting her career on pause to stay home with us. But she went back to school. She got a master's, got back into the classroom, even started her pursuit of a PhD, fell a little short with life circumstances and landed at ABD, all but dissertation. So part of my motivation to finish my doctorate degree was her. As an educator with a specialization in adult literacy and writing, she was my silent editor during my doctoral study. So I am my family's legacy. All right, getting there. Okay, can't resist. We can't rest from this work. So in 2020, George Floyd, as we know, was tragically murdered and sparked a series of protests, demands for justice, police reform, unconscious bias training, and the Black Lives Matter movement was activated in a more grand way. Minority employees were demanding their employer make a statement of support or change the landscape in their establishment to be more welcoming and more inclusive, more just. Many Black workers were walking away from their organizations. And so the company that I mentioned, JP Enterprises, phone was just ringing off the hook during 2020, 2021 for DE&I professionals to come save them, or at least help them check off a good effort box. But for some, there was a genuine concern and wanted to do better. Either the social pressure to announce support for Black Lives Matter, or fear of losing Black and brown employees because you did nothing. Or you may have had a manager that made a racist statement and it reached the media. So you're also trying to combat media perception. So it's during that time we created the curriculum for the No Nonsense experience. We started with some focus groups with CEOs that just happened to be white males. We were learning about things that they were aware of, but a whole lot that they had no clue about. I was appointed as the director of the No Nonsense experience and immediately hired 25 facilitators to lead these no nonsense discussions. They weren't DEI professionals, they were colleagues, they were former students, they were educators, they were social workers, but all were socially conscious, people that were social justice advocates. And I shared this because this is the point. This is gonna be so it's 2:01. So I had to wrap up, right? Okay, so I'm gonna share this last scenario because this is the point. This is disruption. So I hired a former student of mine. So she's a millennial. She is amazing. She does some tech stuff. She's in marketing, but she's always been conscious about fairness. And so I thought about her when we were launching this program. And so she's reading, she's going through the training, she's reading, literature. We're having all the facilitators read and preparing for these conversations. And so she starts to look at the inequities around property ownership in certain areas and fair housing, garbage, I'm sorry. But so she starts digging into her own homeowner contract and finds discriminatory language in her own homeowner contract. And so she is ready to meet with her home ownership association around these issues of discrimination. She's a white woman. She's a millennial. She has influence. She has impact. This is the point of the work. This is the point of the work. Okay, and that kind of sums up why we have to all invest in inclusion. I am doing my part as an administrator at HBCU, but we all have to do our part to even the playing field. I'm not even going to get into that last slide. That's it. That's it for me. I'm sorry I went over.
That's okay. This was great. And I didn't see any questions in the chat box, but I'm sure that in your in our one-on-one after this is over, you can kind of elaborate some more on the final slides and ask or answer some questions that some people may be holding for that space. But before I close out and open it for the private one-on-one, is there any questions for Dr. Carter? None. Okay, all right. Well, I do want to share a few things with you guys before you all leave and go handle the rest of your day. To remind you that in June, we will have our keynote speaker from Morgan State University out of Baltimore, Maryland. He is an associate professor of history and geography. More information will come to you. You'll receive an announcement in your inbox around May. For all of the participants who have registered for our previous sessions, you will also receive communication. If you are not a member of ABERG, or if you are not an employee with UW, we will look at our distribution list and send communication to you about that. The other thing that I want to share with you is that on Hulu, the 1619 Project miniseries is out. It's a 6-part miniseries. I really want to encourage you guys to watch that. A little bit of history about that is my daughter was a part of developing that 1619 Project as a student at Howard University, a historically Black college and university. She was able to work for the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting and was tapped to help develop the 1619 Project and its marketing and branding and the logo. So she's a part of some history as well. So I'm really super excited about that. Please check it out if you have an opportunity to do so. The 1619 Project does reflect on how racial capitalism is directly responsible for economic inequality between Black people and white people, and how government policies that either in purpose or effect discriminated against African Americans. So please take a look at that. I want to thank Dr. Carter for spending this amazing hour with us. Just want to share that, thank you for sharing your parents and your grandparents with us and the history and their legacy. As with you, I'm in many rooms where people will see me and think that I'm supposed to be the expert in all things Black and all things African American. It can be really challenging. And so surrounding yourself with brilliant people who actually have history and legacy and information to share with us is empowering. On behalf of the ABERG and our colleagues, friends, and partners of the Division of Extension, we hope we can call upon you, Dr. Carter, to continue to engage us in this meaningful dialogue. And I want our participants to remember a few pearls that I would like to share with you. Number one, we will forever be tied together victoriously. And that's a quote by Amanda Gorman. And that there is a gift in just being heard. Is the second pearl that I want to share with you. And then the other thing is that if we can get our young Black students, our young Black minds to just understand their own human developments, this will help them to succeed academically. So just keep those pearls in mind as you're moving about your day. And again, as a reminder, Dr. Carter's full bio can be found on our SharePoint sites and accessible to our public facing, and his video recording will be accessible on our public facing YouTube site. We hope that you can, enjoy yourself and that can come back in June when we support our next speaker. So definitely look for that. And please be sure you click the survey and fill out the survey and give us your feedback and thoughts and suggestions about future sessions and discussions. So with that, I will close this part of our discussion off.